Hello, and welcome to The Essential Reads. My name is Isaac, and my goal is to bring you a bunch of classic audiobooks in an easy and accessible way. Today is the final chapter of Dracula. Let's get started. The hunt begins. Or the hunt ends. Chapter 27. Mina Harker's Journal. The 1st of November. All day long we travelled, and at good speed. The horses seem to know that they are being kindly treated, for they go willingly their full stage at best speed. We have now had so many changes, and find the same thing so consistently, that we are encouraged to think the journey will be an easy one. Dr. Van Helsing is laconic. He tells the farmers that he is hurrying to Bistritz, and pays them well to make the exchange of horses. We get hot soup or coffee or tea, and off we go. It is a lovely country, full of beauties of all imaginable kinds, and the people are brave and strong and simple, and seem full of nice qualities. They are very, very suspicious. In the first house we were stopped when the woman who served us saw the scar on my forehead. She crossed herself and put 2 fingers towards me to keep off the evil eye. I believe they went to the trouble of putting an extra amount of garlic into our food, and I can't abide garlic. Ever since then I've taken care not to take off my hat or veil, and so have escaped their suspicions. We are travelling fast, and as we have no driver with us to carry tales, we go ahead of scandal. But I dare say that fear of the evil eye will follow hard behind us all the way. The professor seems tireless. All day he would not take any rest, though he made me sleep for a long spell. At sunset time he hypnotized me, and he says that I answered as usual. Darkness, lapping water, and creaking wood. So our enemy is still on the river. I'm afraid to think of Johnathan, but somehow I have no fear for him, or for myself. I write this whilst we wait in a farmhouse for the horses to be got ready. Dr. Van Helsing is sleeping. Poor dear. He looks very tired and old and grey, but his mouth is set firmly as a conqueror's. Even in his sleep, he is instinct with resolution. When we have well started, I must make him rest whilst I drive. I shall tell him that we have days before us, and he must not break down when most of his strength will be needed. All is ready. We are off shortly. 2nd November. Morning. I was successful, and we took turns driving all night. Now the day is on us, bright and cold. There is a strange heaviness in the air. I say heaviness for want of a better word. I mean that it oppresses us both. It is very cold, and only our warm furs keep us comfortable. At dawn, Van Helsing hypnotized me. He says I answered darkness, creaking wood, and roaring water. So the river is changing as they ascend. I do hope that my darling will not run any chance of danger. More than need be. But we are in God's hands. 2nd November, night. All day long driving. The country gets wilder as we go, and the great spurs of the Carpathians, which at Veresti seemed so far from us and so low on the horizon, now seem to gather round us and tower in front. We both seem good in spirits. I think we make an effort each to cheer the other. In the doing, we so cheer ourselves. Dr. Van Helsing says that by morning we shall reach the Borgo Pass. The houses are very few now, and the professor says that the last horses we got will have to go on with us, lest we may not be able to change. He got 2 in addition to the 2 we changed, so that we have a rude 4 in hand. The dear horses are patient and good, and they give us no trouble. We are not worried with other travellers, and so even I can drive. We shall get to the pass in daylight. We do not want to arrive before, so we take it easy, and each have a long rest in turn. Oh, what will tomorrow bring to us? We go to seek the place where my poor darling suffered so much. God grant that we may be guided all right, and that he will design to watch over my husband and those dear to us both, and who are in such deadly peril. As for me, I am not worthy of his sight. Alas, I am unclean to his eyes, and shall be until he designed to let me stand forth in his sight as one of those who have not incurred his wrath. Memorandum by Abraham Van Helsing. 4th of November. This is to my old and true friend, John Seward, M.D., of Purfleet, London, in case I may not see him. It may explain. It is morning, and I write by a fire, which all the night I have kept alive, Madam Mina aiding me. It is cold. Cold. So cold that the grey heavy sky is full of snow, which, when it fall, will settle for all winter as the ground is hardening to receive it. It seems to have affected Madam Mina. She has been so heavy of head all day that she was not like herself. She sleeps and sleeps and sleeps. She, who is usual so alert, have done literally nothing all the day. She even have lost her appetite. She make no entry into her little diary, she who writes so faithfully at every pause. Something whispered to me that all is not well. However, tonight she is more vif. Her long sleep all day have refreshed and restored her, for now she is all sweet and bright as ever. At sunset I try to hypnotize her, but alas, with no effect. The power has grown less and less with each day, and tonight it fails me altogether. Well, God's will be done, whatever it may be, and whithersoever it may lead. Now to the historical, for as Madam Mina write not in her stenography, I must, in my cumbrous old fashion, that so each day of us may not go unrecorded. We got to the Borgo Pass just after sunrise yesterday morning. When I saw the signs of the day, I got ready for the hypnotism. We stopped our carriage and got down so that there might be no disturbance. I made a crouch with furs, and Madam Mina, lying down, yielded herself as usual, but more slow and more short time than ever to the hypnotic sleep. As before came the answer. Darkness and the swirling of water. Then she woke, bright and radiant, and we go on our way, and soon reach the pass. At this time and place, she becomes all on fire with zeal. Something new. Some new guiding power be in her manifested, for she points to a road and say, "This is the way." "How do you know it?" I ask. "Of course I know it," she answer, and with a pause add, "Have not my Johnathan travelled it, and wrote of his travels?" At first I think somewhat strange, but soon I see that there be only one such by-road. It is used but little, and very different from the coach road from Bukovina to Bistritz, which is more wide and hard, and more of use. So we came down this road. When we meet other ways, we were not always sure that they were other roads at all, for they be neglected, and light snow have fallen. The horses know, and they only. I give rein to them, and they go on, so patient. By and by we find all the things which Johnathan have note in that wonderful diary of him. Then we go on, for long, long hours and hours. At the first, I tell Madam Mina to sleep. She try, and succeed. She sleep all the time, till, at the last, I feel myself to suspicious grow, and attempt to wake her. But she sleep on, and I may not wake her, though I try. I do not wish to try too hard, lest I harm her, for I know that she have suffered much, and sleep, at times, can be all in all to her. I think I drowse myself, for, all of a sudden, I feel guilt, as though I have done something. I find myself bolt up, with the reins in my hand, and the good horses go along, jog, jog, just as ever. I look down, and find Madam Mina still asleep. It is not now far off from sunset time, and over the snow, the light of the sun flow in big yellow flood, so that we throw great long shadow on where the mountains rise so steep. For we are going up, and all is oh so wild and rocky, as though it were the end of the world. Then I arouse Madam Mina. This time she wake with not much trouble, and then I try to put her to hypnotic sleep. But she sleep not, being as though I were not. Still I try and try, till, all at once, I find myself in dark. So I look round, and find that the sun have gone down. Madam Mina laugh, and I turn and look at her. She's now quite awake, and look so well as I never saw her since that night at Carfax when we first entered the Count's house. I'm amazed, and not at ease then. But she's so bright and tender and thoughtful for me that I forget all fear. I light a fire, for we have brought supply of wood with us, and she prepared food, whilst I undo the horses and set them, tethered in shelter, to feed. Then, when I return to the fire, she have my supper ready. I go to help her, but she smile and tell me that she have eat already, that she was so hungry that she would not wait. I like it not, and I have grave doubts, but I fear to affright her, and so I am silent of it. She help me, and I eat alone, and then we wrap in fur and lie beside the fire, and I tell her to sleep whilst I watch. But presently I forget of all watching, and when sudden I remember that I watch, I find her lying quiet, but awake, and looking at me with so bright eyes. Once, twice more the same occur, and I get much sleep till before morning. When I wake, I try to hypnotize her, but alas, though she shut her eyes obedient, she may not sleep. The sun rise up and up and up, and then sleep come to her too late, but so heavy that she will not wake. I have to lift her up and place her sleeping in the carriage when I have harnessed the horses and made them all ready. Madam is still asleep, and sleep, and she look in her sleep more healthy and more redder than ever before, and I like it not. I am afraid. I'm afraid of all things, even to think, but I must go on my way. The stake we play for is life and death, or more than these, and we must not flinch. 5th of November, morning. Let me be accurate in everything, for though you and I have seen some strange things together, you may be first to think that I, Van Helsing, am mad. That the many horrors, and the so long strain on nerves, has at the last turned my brain. All yesterday we travel, ever getting closer to the mountains, and moving more and more wild than desert land. There are great frowning precipices, and much falling water, and nature seemed to have held some time her carnival. Madam Mina still sleep, and though I did have hunger and appease it, I could not waken her, even for food. I began to fear that the fatal spell of the place was upon her, tainted as she is with the vampire baptism. Well, I said to myself, if it be that she sleep all day, it shall also be that I do not sleep at night. As we travel on the rough road, for road of an ancient and imperfect kind there was, I held down my head and slept. Again I waked with a sense of guilt and of time past, and found Madam Mina still sleeping, and the sun low down. But all was indeed changed. The frowning mountains seemed further away, and we were near the top of a steep rising hill, on the summit of which was such a castle as Johnathan tell of in his diary. At once I exulted, and feared. For now, good or ill, the end was near. I woke Madam Mina, and again tried to hypnotize her, but alas, unavailing till too late. Then, ere the great dark came upon us, for even after down sun, the heavens reflected the gone sun on the snow, and all was, for a time, in a great twilight. I took out the horses and fed them in what shelter I could. Then I make a fire, and near it I make Madam Mina, now wake, and more charming than ever, sit comfortable amid her rugs. I got ready food, but she would not eat, simply saying that she had not hunger. I did not press her, knowing her unavailingness. But I myself eat, for I must needs now be strong for all. Then, with the fear on me of what might be, I drew a ring so big for her comfort, round where Madam Mina sat, and over the ring I passed some of the wafer, and I broke it fine, so that all was well guarded. She sat still at the time, so still as one dead, and she grew whiter, and even whiter till the snow was not more pale, and no word she said. But when I drew near, she clung to me, and I could know that the poor soul shook her from her head to her feet with a tremor that was pain to feel. I said to her presently, when she had grown more quiet, "Will you not come over to the fire?" For I wished to make a test of what she could. She rose obedient, but when she had made a step, she stopped, and stood as one stricken. "Why not go on?" I asked. She shook her head, and, coming back, sat down in her place. Then, looking at me with open eyes, as of one waked from sleep, she said simply, "I cannot," and remained silent. I rejoiced, for I knew what she could not. None of those that we dreaded could. Though there might be danger to her body, yet her soul was safe. Presently the horses began to scream, and tore at their tethers, till I came and quieted them. When they did feel my hands on them, they whinnied, low, as in joy, licked my hands, and were quiet for a time. Many times through the night did I come to them, till it arrived to the cold hour when all nature is at lowest, and every time my coming was quiet of them. In the cold hour the fire began to die, and I was about stepping forth to replenish it, for now the snow came in flying sweeps, and with it a chill mist. Even in the dark there was a light of some kind, as there is ever over snow, and it seemed as though the snow flurries and wreaths of mist took shape as of women with trailing garments. All was in dead, grim silence, only that the horses whinnied and cowered as if in terror of the worst. I began to fear. Horrible fears. But then came to me the sense of safety, that in the ring wherein I stood, I began, too, to think that my imaginings were of the night, and gloom, and the unrest that I have gone through, and all the terrible anxiety. It was as though my memories of all Johnathan's horrid experience were befooling me, for the snowflakes and the mist began to wheel and circle round, till I could get as those shadowy glimpses of those women that would have kissed him. And then the horses cowered lower and lower, and moaned in terror as men do in pain. Even the madness of fright was not to them, so that they could break away. I feared for my dear Madam Mina when these weird figures drew near and circled round. I looked at her, but she sat calm and smiled at me. When I would have stepped to the fire to replenish it, she caught me and held me back and whispered, like in a voice that one bears in a dream, so low it was, "No, no. Do not go without. Here you are safe." I turned to her, and looking in her eyes, said, "But you, it is for you that I fear." Whereat she laughed, a laugh low and unreal, and said, "Fear for me? Why for me? None safer in all the world from them than I am." And, as I wondered at the meaning of her words, a puff of wind made the flame leap up, and I did see the red scar on her forehead. Then, alas, I knew. Did I not, I would soon have learned, for the wheeling figures of mist and snow came closer, but keeping ever without the holy circle. Then they began to materialize, till, if God have not taken away my reason, for I saw it through my eyes, they were before me, in actual flesh, the same 3 women that Johnathan saw in the room, when they would have kissed his throat. I knew the swaying round forms, the bright hard eyes, the white teeth, the ruddy colour, the voluptuous lips. They smiled ever at poor dear Madam Mina, and, as their laugh came through the silence of the night, they twinned their arms and pointed to her, and said, in those so sweet tingling tones that Johnathan said were of the intolerable sweetness of the water glasses, "Come, sister, come to us. Come, come." In fear I turned to my poor Madam Mina, and my heart with gladness leapt like flames, for oh, the terror in her sweet eyes, the repulsion, the horror, told a story to my heart that was full of hope. God be thanked she was not yet of them. I seized some of the firewood which was by me, and, holding out some of the wafer, advanced on them towards the fire. They drew back before me, and laughed their low, horrid laugh. I fed the fire, and feared them not, for I knew that we were safe within our protections. They could not approach me, whilst so armed, nor Madam Mina, while she remained within the ring, which she could not leave no more than they could enter. The horses had ceased to moan, and lay still on the ground. The snow fell on them softly, and they grew whiter. I knew that there was for the poor beasts no more terror. And so we remained till the red of dawn began to fall through the snow gloom. I was desolate and afraid, and full of woe and terror. But when that beautiful sun began to climb the horizon, life was to me again. At the first coming of the dawn, the horrid figures melted into the whirling mists and snow. The wreaths of transparent gloom moved away toward the castle, and were lost. Instinctively, with the dawn coming, I turned to Madam Mina, intending to hypnotize her, but she lay in a deep and sudden sleep, from which I could not wake her. I tried to hypnotize through her sleep, but she made no response, none at all, and the day broke. I fear yet to stir. I have made my fire, and have seen the horses. They are all dead. Today I have much to do here, and I keep waiting till the sun is up high, for there may be places where I must go, but the sunlight, though snow and mist obscure it, will be to me a safety. I will strengthen me with breakfast, and then I will to me my terrible work. Madam Mina still sleeps, and, God be thanked, she is calm in her sleep.
Johnathan Harker's Journal. 4th of November, evening. The accident to launch has been a terrible thing for us. Only for it we should have overtaken the boat long ago, and by now my dear Mina would have been free. I fear to think of her, off on the wold near that horrid place. We've got horses, and we follow on the track. I note this whilst Godalming is getting ready. We have our arms. The Scansey must look out if they mean to fight. If only Morris and Seward were with us. We must only hope. If I write no more, goodbye, Mina. God bless and keep you. Dr. Seward's Diary. The 5th of November. With the dawn, we saw the body of Scarney before us, dashing away from the river with their leiter wagon. They surrounded it in a cluster, and hurried along as though beset. The snow is falling lightly, and there is a strange excitement in the air. It may be our own excited feelings, but the depression is strange. Far off, I hear the howling of wolves. The snow brings them down from the mountains, and there are dangers to all of us, and from all sides. The horses are nearly ready, and we are soon off. We ride to death of someone. God alone knows who, or where, or what, or when, or how it may be. Dr. Van Helsing's Memorandum. The 5th of October, afternoon. I'm at least sane. Thank God for that mercy at all events, though the proving it has been dreadful. When I left Madam Mina sleeping within the holy circle, I took my way to the castle. The blacksmith hammer which I took in the carriage from Bresti was useful. Though the doors were all open, I broke them off the rusty hinges, lest some ill intent or ill chance should close them, so that being entered, I might not get out. Johnathan's bitter experience served me here. By memory of his diary, I found my way to the old chapel, for I knew here my work lay. The air was oppressive. It seemed as if there were some sulphurous fume, which at times made me dizzy. Either there was a roaring in my ears, or I heard afar off the howl of wolves. Then I bethought me of dear Madam Mina, and I was in terrible plight. The dilemma had me between his horns. Her I had not dared to take into the place, but left safe from the vampire in that holy circle. And yet, even there would be the wolf. I resolved me that my work lay here, and that as to the wolves, we must submit, if it were God's will. At any rate, it was only death and freedom beyond, so did I choose for her. Had it but been for myself, the choice had been easy. The maw of the wolf were better in rest than the grave of the vampire. So I make my choice and go on with my work. I knew that there were at least 3 graves to find. Graves that are in habit. So I search, and I find one of them. She lay in her vampire sleep, so full of life and voluptuous beauty that I shudder, as though I have come to do murder. I doubt not that in old time, when such things were, many a man who set forth to do such a task as mine, found, at the last, his heart fail him, and then his nerve. So he delay, till the mere beauty and fascination of the wanton undead have hypnotized him, and he remain on, till sunset come, and the vampire sleep be over. Then the beautiful eyes of the fair woman open, and look love, and the voluptuous mouth presents to a kiss, and the man is weak. And there remain one more victim in the vampire fold, one more to swell the grim and grisly ranks of the undead. There is some fascination, surely, when I am moved by the mere presence of such a one, even lying as she lay in a tomb fretted with age and heavy with the dust of centuries, though there be that horrid odour such as the lairs of the Count have had. Yes, I was moved. I, Van Helsing, with all my purpose, and with my motive for hate, I was moved to a yearning for delay which seemed to paralyze my faculties and to clog my very soul. It may have been that the need of natural sleep and the strange oppression of air were beginning to overcome me. Certain it was that I was lapsing into sleep, the open-eyed sleep of one who yields to a sweet fascination, when there came through the snow-stilled air a long, low wail, so full of woe and pity that it woke me like the sound of a clarion. For it was the voice of my dear Madam Mina that I heard. Then I braced myself again to my horrid task, and found, by wrenching away one of the tomb-tops, one other of the sisters, the dark one. I dared not pause to look on her as I had her sister, lest once more I should begin to be in thrall. But I go on searching, until, presently, I find in a high, great tomb, as if made by one much beloved, that the other fair sister which, like Johnathan, I had seen to gather herself out of the atoms of the mist. She was so fair to look on, so radiantly beautiful, so exquisitely voluptuous, that the very instinct of man in me, which calls some of my sex to love and protect one of her, made my head whirl with new emotion. But God be thanked that the sole wail of my dear Madam Mina had not died out in my ears, and, before the spell could be wrought further upon me, I had nerved myself to my vile work. By this time, I had searched all the tombs in the chapel. So far as I could tell, and as there had only been 3 of these undead phantoms around us in the night, I took it that there were no more of active undead existent. There was one great tomb, more lordly than all the rest. It was huge and nobly proportioned. On it was but one word: Dracula. Then this was the undead home of the king vampire, to whom so many more were due. Its emptiness spoke eloquent to make certain what I knew. Before I began to restore these women to their dead selves through my awful work, I laid in Dracula's tomb some of the wafer, and so banished him from it, undead, forever. Then began my terrible task, and I dreaded it. Had it been but one, it had been easy, comparative. But 3? To begin twice more after I had been through a deed of horror. For it was terrible with the sweet Miss Lucy. What would it not be with these strange ones who had survived through centuries, and who have been strengthened by the passing of the years, who would, if they could, have fought for their foul lives? Oh, my friend John, but it was butcher work. Had I not been nerved by my thoughts of other dead, and of the living over whom hung such a pall of fear, I could not have got on. I tremble, and tremble even yet, though, till all was over, God be thanked, my nerves did stand. Had I not seen the repose in the first glance, and the gladness that stole over it just ere the final disillusion came, as realization as the soul had been won, I could not have gone further with my butchery. I could not have endured the horrid screeching as the stake drove home, the plunging of writhing form and lips of bloody foam. I should have fled in terror and left my work undone. But it is over, and the poor souls, I can pity them now and weep, as I think of them placid each in her full sleep of death, for short moments ere fading. For friend John, hardly had my knife severed the head of each, before the whole body began to melt away and crumble into its native dust, as though the dead that should have come centuries agone had at last assert himself and say at once and loud, "I am her." Before I left the castle, I so fixed its entrances that never more can the Count enter there undead. When I stepped into the circle where Madam Mina slept, she woke from her sleep, and, seeing me, cried out in pain that I had endured too much. "Come," she said, "come away from this awful place. Let us go on to meet my husband, who is, I know, coming toward us." She was looking thin and pale and weak, but her eyes were pure and glowed with fervour. I was glad to see her paleness and her illness, for my mind was full of that fresh horror of that ruddy vampire's sleep. And so, with trust and hope, and yet full of fear, we go eastward to meet our friends, and him, whom Madam Mina tell me that she knows are coming to meet us. Mina Harker's Journal.
6th of November. It was late in the afternoon when the Professor and I took our way toward the east, whence I knew Johnathan was coming. We did not go fast, though the way was steeply downhill, for we had to take heavy rugs and wraps with us. We dared not face the possibility of being left without warmth in the cold and snow. We had to take some of our provisions too, for we were in perfect desolation, and, so far as we could see through the snowfall, there was not even the sign of a habitation. When we had gone about a mile, I was tired with the heavy walking and sat down to rest. Then we looked back and saw where the clear line of Dracula's castle cut the sky, for we were so deep under the hill whereon it was set that the angle of perspective of the Carpathian mountain was far below it. We saw it in all its grandeur, perched 1,000 feet on the summit of a sheer precipice, and with seemingly a great gap between it and the steep adjacent mountain on any side. There was something wild and uncanny about the place. We could hear the distant howling of wolves. They were far off, but the sound, even though coming muffled through the deadening snowfall, was full of terror. I knew from the way Dr. Van Helsing was searching about that he was trying to seek some strategic point where he would be less exposed in case of attack. The rough roadway still led downwards. We could trace it through the drifted snow. In a little while, the Professor signalled to me, so I got up and joined him. He had found a wonderful spot, a sort of natural hollow in a rock with an entrance like a doorway between two boulders. He took me by the hand and drew me in. "See," he said, "here you will be in shelter, and if the wolves do come, I can meet them one by one." He brought in our furs and made a snug rest for me, and got out some provisions and forced them upon me. But I could not eat. To even try to do so was repulsive to me, and, much as I would have liked to please him, I could not bring myself to the attempt. He looked very sad, but did not reproach me. Taking his field glasses from the case, he stood on the top of the rocks and began to search the horizon. Suddenly, he called out, "Look, Madam Mina! Look! Look!" I sprang up and stood beside him on the rock. He handed me the glasses and pointed. The snow was now falling more heavily and swirled about fiercely, for a high wind was beginning to blow. However, there were times where there were pauses between the snow flurries, and I could see a long way round. From the height where we were, it was possible to see a great distance, and far off beyond the white wastes of snow. Far off beyond the white wastes of snow, I could see the river lying like a black ribbon in kinks and curls as it wound its way. Straight in front of us, and not far off, in fact, so near that I wondered we had not noticed it before, came a group of mounted men hurrying along. In the midst of them was a cart, a long litre wagon which swept from side to side, like a dog's tail wagging with each stern inequality of the road. Outlined against the snow as they were, I could see from the men's clothes that they were peasants or gypsies of some kind. On the cart was a great square chest. My heart leapt as I saw it, for I felt that the end was coming. The evening was now drawing close, and well I knew that at sunset, the thing, which was till then imprisoned there, would take new freedom, and could, in many forms, elude all pursuit. In fear, I turned to the professor. To my consternation, however, he was not there. An instant later, I saw him below me. Round the rock he had drawn a circle, such as we had found shelter in last night. When he had completed it, he stood beside me again, saying, "At least you shall be safe here, from him." He took the glasses from me, and, at the next lull of the snow, swept the whole space below us. "See," he said, "they come quickly. They are flogging the horses and galloping as hard as they can." He paused and went on in a hollow voice. "They are racing for the sunset. We may be too late. God's will be done." Down came another blinding rush of snow, and the whole landscape was blotted out. It soon passed, however, and, once more, his glasses were fixed on the plain. Then came a sudden cry. "Look! Look! Look! See, 2 horsemen follow fast, coming up from the south. It must be Quincy and John. Take the glass. Look, before the snow blots it all out." And I took it and looked. The 2 men might be Dr Seward and Mr Morris. I knew, at all events, that neither of them was Johnathan. At the same time, I knew Johnathan was not far off. Looking round, I saw on the north side of the coming party 2 other men riding at breakneck speed. One of them I knew was Johnathan, and the other I took, of course, to be Lord Godalming. They too were pursuing the party with the cart. When I told the professor, he shouted in glee, like a schoolboy, and, after looking intently till snowfall made sight impossible, he laid his Winchester rifle ready to use against the boulder at the opening of our shelter. "They are all converging," he said. "When the time comes, we shall have the gypsies on all sides." I got out my revolver, ready to hand, for, whilst we were speaking, the howling of wolves came louder and louder. When the snowstorm was abated a moment, we looked again. It was strange to see snow falling in such heavy flakes close to us, and beyond, the sun shining more and more brightly as it sank down towards the far mountain tops. Sweeping the glass all around us, I could see, here and there, dots, moving singly and in 2s, and 3s, and larger numbers. The wolves were gathering for their prey. Every instant seemed an age whilst we waited. The wind came now in fierce bursts, and the snow was driven with a fury as it swept upon us in circling eddies. At times we could not see an arm's length before us, but at others, as the hollow-sounding wind swept by us, it seemed to clear the airspace around us so that we could see afar off. We had, of late, been so accustomed to watch for sunrise and sunset that we knew with fair accuracy when it would be, and we knew that before long the sun would set. It was hard to believe that by our watches it was less than an hour that we waited in that rocky shelter before the various bodies began to converge close upon us. The wind came now with fiercer and more bitter sweeps, and more steadily from the north. It seemingly had driven all the snow clouds from us, for, with only occasional bursts, the snow fell. We could distinguish clearly the individuals of each party, the pursued and the pursuers. Strangely enough, those pursued did not seem to realize, or at least to care, that they were pursued. They seemed, however, to hasten with redoubled speed as the sun dropped lower and lower on the mountain tops. Closer and closer they drew. The Professor and I crouched down behind our rock and held our weapons ready. I could see that he was determined that they should not pass. One and all were quite unaware of our presence. All at once, two voices shouted to halt! One was my Johnathan's, raised in a high key of passion, the other Mr. Morris's strong, resolute tone of quiet command. The gypsies may not have known the language, but there was no mistaking the tone in whatever tongue the words were spoken. Instinctively, they reined in, and, at the instant, Lord Godalming and Johnathan dashed up on one side, and Dr. Seward and Mr. Morris on the other. And the leader of the gypsies, a splendid-looking fellow who sat on his horse like a centaur, waved them back, and, in a fierce voice, gave his companions some word to proceed. They lashed the horses, which sprang forward, but the four men raised their Winchester rifles, and, in an unmistakable way, commanded them to stop. At the same moment, Dr. Van Helsing and I rose behind the rock and pointed our weapons at them. Seeing that they were surrounded, the men tightened their reins and drew up. The leader turned to them and gave a word, at which every man of the gypsy party drew what weapons he carried, knife or pistol, and held himself in readiness to attack. Issue was joined in an instant. The leader, with a quick movement of his rein, threw his horse out in front, and, pointing first to the sun, now close down on the hilltops and then to the castle, said something which I did not understand. For answer, all four men of our party threw themselves from their horses and dashed towards the cart. I should have felt terrible fear at seeing Johnathan in such danger, but the ardour of battle must have been upon me as well as the rest of them. I felt no fear, but only a wild surging desire to do something. Seeing the quick movement of our parties, the leader of the gypsies gave command. His men instantly formed round the cart in a sort of undisciplined endeavour, each one shouldering and pushing the others in his eagerness to carry out the order. In the midst of this, I could see that Johnathan, on one side of the ring of men, and Quincy, on the other, were forcing a way to the cart. It was evident that they were bent on finishing their task before the sun should set. Nothing seemed to stop, or even to hinder them, neither the levelled weapons, or the flashing knives of the gypsies in front, or the howling of the wolves behind, appeared even to attract their attention. Jonathan's impetuosity and the manifest singleness of his purpose seemed to overawe those in front of him. Instinctively they cowered aside and let him pass. In an instant he had jumped onto the cart, and, with a strength which seemed incredible, raised the great box and flung it over the wheel to the ground. In the meantime, Mr. Morris had to use force to pass through his side of the ring of Scanney. All the time I had been breathlessly watching Johnathan, I had, with the trail of my eye, seen him pressing desperately forward, and had seen the knives of the gypsies flash as he won his way through them, and they cut at him. He parried with his great bowie knife, and at first I thought that he too had come through in safety, but as he sprang beside Johnathan, who had now jumped from the cart, I could see that with his left hand he was clutching at his side, and that blood was spurting through his fingers. He did not delay notwithstanding this, for, as Johnathan, with desperate energy, attacked one end of the chest, attempting to prise off the lid with his great karuki knife, he attacked the other frantically with his bowie. Under the efforts of both men, the lid began to yield. The nails drew back with a quick screeching sound, and the top of the box was thrown back. By this time, the gypsies, seeing themselves covered by the Winchesters, and at the mercy of Lord Godalming and Dr. Seward, had given in and made no further resistance. The sun was almost down on the mountain tops, and the shadow of the whole group fell long upon the snow. I saw the Count lying within the box upon the earth, some of which the rude falling from the cart had scattered over him. He was deathly pale, just like a waxen image, and the red eyes glared with the horrible vindictive look which I knew too well. As I looked, the eyes saw the sinking sun, and the look of hate in them turned to triumph. But on the instant came a sweep and flash of Jonathan's great knife. I shrieked as I saw it tear through the throat, whilst at the same moment Mr. Morris's bowie knife plunged into the heart. It was like a miracle, but before our very eyes, and, almost in the drawing of a breath, the whole body crumbled into dust and passed from our sight. I shall be glad, as long as I live, that even in that moment of final dissolution, there was in the face a look of peace, such as I could never have imagined might have rested there. The Castle of Dracula now stood out against the red sky, and every stone of its broken battlements was articulated against the light of the setting sun. The gypsies, taking us as in some way the cause of the extraordinary disappearance of the dead man, turned, without a word, and rode away as if for their lives. Those who were unmounted jumped upon the later wagon and shouted to the horsemen not to desert them. The wolves, which had withdrawn to a safe distance, followed in their wake, leaving us alone. Mr. Morris, who had sunk to the ground, leaned on his elbow, holding his hand pressed to his side. The blood still gushed through his fingers. I flew to him, for the holy circle did not now keep me back. So did the two doctors. Johnathan knelt beside him, and the wounded man laid back his head on his shoulder. With a sigh, he took, with a feeble effort, my hand in that of his own, which was unstained. He must have seen the anguish of my heart on my face, for he smiled at me and said,
"I am only too happy to have been of any service. Oh, God!"
he cried suddenly, struggling up to a sitting posture and pointing to me.
"It was worth this to die. Look."
The sun was now right down upon the mountain top, and the red gleams fell upon my face so that it was bathed in rosy light. With one impulse, the men sank on their knees, and a deep and earnest "Amen" broke from all as their eyes followed the pointing of his finger as the dying man spoke.
"Now, God be thanked that this has not all been in vain. See, the snow is not more stainless than her forehead. The curse has passed away."
And to our bitter grief, with a smile and in silence, he died. A gallant gentleman.
Note: 7 years ago, we all went through the flames, and the happiness of some of us since then is, we think, well worth the pain we endured. It is an added joy to Mina and me that our boy's birthday is the same day as that on which Quincy Morris died. His mother holds, I know, the secret belief that some of our brave friend's spirit has passed into him. His bundle of names link all our band of men together, but we call him Quincy. In the summer of this year, we made a journey to Transylvania, and went over the old ground which was, and is to us, so full of vivid and terrible memories. It is almost impossible to believe that the things which we'd seen with our own eyes and heard with our own ears were living truths. Every trace of all that had been was blotted out. The castle stood as before, reared high above a waste of desolation. When we got home, we got to talking of the old time, which we could all look back on without despair, for Godalming and Seward are both happily married. I took the papers from the safe where they have been since our return so long ago. We were struck with the fact that, in all the mass of material of which the record is composed, there is hardly one authentic document, nothing but a mass of typewriting, except the Latin notebooks of Mina and Seward and myself and Van Helsing's memorandum. We could hardly ask anyone, even if we did wish to accept these as proofs of so wild a story. Van Helsing summed it all up when he said, with our boy on his knee, "We want no proofs. We ask none to believe us. This boy will someday know of what a brave and gallant woman his mother is. Already he knows her sweetness and loving care. Later on he will understand how some men so loved her that they did dare much for her sake." Johnathan Harker. Thank you so very much for listening. If you enjoyed, please like, comment, share, all that jazz. And if you really enjoyed, do subscribe, because there's more to come. And if you're listening on podcast, please leave a review. It helps get this in front of many people as possible, and it really makes my day. That is one of the best books I think I've ever read. That was fantastic, and I truly understand how it has stood the test of time. I kind of want to read the botched, I think, Danish translation or Icelandic translation that makes it really erotic. It just sounds hilarious to read. I probably won't record that, though. That'll just be a private read for me because it sounds really weird. But I really hope you enjoyed. The next audiobook will be coming out shortly. It is going to be Animal Farm by George Orwell, my literal favourite book ever. So please stay tuned for that. Once again, I thank you for listening. And until next time, bye-bye.